This 2020 study was something where we were looking at media consumption. And so folks who took that survey had to have engaged with at least one book in the last 12 months. And one of the really interesting things that we saw as we looked at consumption of games alongside TV, film, and books is that Gen Z and Millennials were really interesting and very avid. So that's what we've done for this second survey, is do a deep dive into that for 2022. There are some folks here today, Angela, Brian, who were part of the research committee for that first project, and we really appreciated kind of the peer review process for that too. So it's been a great opportunity.
And one thing to note is that the people who we had 4,000 plus survey respondents in 2020. We had 2,000 plus for 2022. In 2022, they didn't have to have opened a book. So we did capture data about non-readers, or people who identify as, there are people who identify as non-readers.
Yes. Yes, so we have so much data. We're not going to be able to really do it all justice. So we have distilled some 4 points that we thought might be interesting to you. And then we'd also like to know what you find most interesting and what you'd like to see more of. So the first point is that Gen Z and Millennials are downloading books for free, and they are super consumers. This follows up from the 2020 data, where we found that pirates are really avid. They're, of course, pirating books, but also reading and buying, and that's really interesting. In terms of library use, we found that BIPOC Gen Z and Millennials use libraries more, physical and digital. And so in continuing the library conversation and working with publishers, it's in part an equity issue. Gen Z and Millennials use subscriptions extensively. We'll talk more about that. And we found that they are identifying as readers, but also as gamers and fans. Those are the top three. And so thinking about those identity pieces will be really important.
So here's the TLDR. Like, to call people who download illegally pirates is to get a tiny fraction of their activity. These are people who are super consuming across media. They discover more books through other kinds of media, like games, like streaming. So to call people pirates and focus only on point of sale is to miss the avid behaviors across different silos, and to not think enough about the community dimensions involved in accessing things online. So 61% of Gen Zs and Millennials are downloading or reading books for free. 52% are buying books that they've already downloaded. So it is not a lost sale. More than half of them are getting out there and buying things. And in other data that we have that you can see on the URL that I supplied on the other screen, they're buying extensively. I'm sorry, lost the thread. So they're buying extensively, and they are discovering they're using libraries more than other people. 21% of people who are downloading books said that long wait times deterred them from using the library.
I will also add,
yeah, sure.
Since we were talking about scholarly publishing,
yeah,
that we did ask questions about textbooks and pirating textbooks, and 40% of the Gen Z Millennials are doing that. So.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about Amazon as a space that's hospitable to piracy. It puts the onus of anti-counterfeiting measures on the harmed party. Section 230 is protecting, those protections might insulate Amazon from bad actors who sell counterfeit goods on their platform and are not working hard enough to stop piracy and the selling of pirating goods on their platform. One thing to know is that 74% of all consumer search in the US starts with Amazon. So think about the way that the Amazon app has trained people to come there as their first point of contact with commerce. And that is particularly true for Gen Zs and Millennials. So you can see that Gen Zs and Millennials are discovering more content on Amazon-owned platforms than they are in libraries. They are using libraries. I think 54% of them are using libraries. So we're not saying...
And that's physical visits.
Yes, physical visits. Although there's an interesting problem that with digital that Rachel will get into. So you can see the numbers on this. I don't need to read it out for you. But it is a problem that the primary site of discovery is happening so much through one corporation. So since 61% are downloading or reading for free, 28% of those who are downloading or reading for free are then turning around and selling those books on Amazon. So 8% of our total survey population are engaging in that particular behavior. That's a really high number.
Yeah, there's definitely more discovery and analysis to do there. So since we've been talking about libraries, let's move into that. As we said before, BIPOC, Gen Z, and Millennials are using libraries more than the general population. So it really is, we see the FAIR terms for libraries issue as an equity one. And have put some data here about how high browsing shelves in public libraries is for discovery, especially for Asian, Gen Z, and Millennials, and Latinx. Black and Asian Gen Z and Millennials are more likely to have used the digital library services, and Black Gen Z and Millennials had a really high percentage of visiting the physical library, 64%, which was about 10% higher than the general population. The messaging problem that Kathi hinted at is that we can see that 54% have visited their local library in the last 12 months, but they were reporting really low digital use. And we've been doing a lot of listening with librarians, and that doesn't match. It's not true that library use is really down, but they're not necessarily connecting things like using their Libby app with digitally connecting with their local library. So there's more to be discovered.
Yeah. So a very simple solution would be for Libby, for Overdrive, to allow local libraries to put their own branding on the front page of the Libby app, so that when people hit Libby, they knew that they were engaging their local public library, that local tax dollars are paying for that access. So there's just a disconnect happening. But apps are certainly a key way that Gen Zs and Millennials are reading.
Yeah. One of the really interesting things about libraries is that they are attracting people who don't identify as readers. So as we found in our 2020 and 2022 data, it's really more about avidness than it is about here's a gamer, here's a reader. Those who are reading are also gaming, and they're avid media consumers. And then there are those who aren't as avid. And so how this seems like an opportunity to build an identity as readers for those who are visiting the library, but not necessarily there yet. And we've done some observations with teams at the Cuyahoga County Public Library branches, and it was just really interesting to see, some of them coming just because they just want to hang out at the library with their friends, but have no, intention of checking out books or reading. So kind of interesting.
And an additional context with that as well is when we were hanging out in Cuyahoga, Ohio with these teams, they were also talking about having to walk through metal detectors to get into their school. How if you go to the library at your school, you have to have a reason to be there. You have to be taking a test or doing your homework. There's less chill out space. There's less just amble around and look at books and think about stuff space. So that's a reality for K-12 students that our research points toward, and then the qualitative work that we did with those teams helped reveal. Yeah. So here's another TLDR, right? That Gen Zs and Millennials are extensively using subscription services. So mobile-only content is a huge growth area for Gen Z in particular. Gen Zs and Millennials subscribe to a lot of mobile-only content. Here are two examples. Webtoon, which is 63% are paying for Webtoons. And you should know that the point of sale is super, super cheap, like 10 cents, right? And what they are buying quicker access. So if you want to see that that webtoon that you're really interested in. Remember, webtoon is a single pane comic accessed on mobile. So if you want earlier access, you pay for that access. And you get a long lead time. You can have a lot of free content before anyone's charging you money. So cast your mind back to that data about piracy and illegal downloading. Robust sampling helps business and doesn't hurt it as much. So 86% are paying for Substack, which blew me out of the water. I was really surprised, because you can get a lot of Substack for free, but 86% of them are paying for one or more. And then accessing free Webtoon and Substacks is happening in even higher numbers. And you can read the data about worldwide and global use. So a key point is that youth reading habits are being formed right now in apps. And think about it, like apps are often commercially supported environments. So it isn't a surprise that you'll see later that so many Gen Zs and Millennials are buying books based on ads that they've seen. They're clicking through on those ads. Why? Because they live in commercial environments more than previous generations did. For those of us Gen Xers who like watched TV and read newspapers, things were ad supported. But you went into those environments. They weren't like on your body, on your phone, that you're consulting multiple times a day, and that's an important context. As Michael was saying, in Frankfurt, 25% of Kobo sales are happening in self-pub. This is largely not accounted in industry data, and it should be thought through. And then Naver, which is the parent company out of South Korea that owns both Wattpad and Webtoon. I actually listened to their Q2 2022 earnings call, and if you'd like to curl your eyelashes, I recommend you give it a listen. They've got 20% year-over-year growth. They have 26% of Korean customers are paying for Webtoon, and it's single digit now in Japan and the US, but that won't last. So watch the IP development, because like they are developing, this is like it's all user-generated content in both of those platforms. The things that get a lot of attention get development deals. They have 120 pieces of content in web development in Hollywood. So they have a studio in Hollywood now.
All right, our last point is about the identity of Gen Z and Millennials as readers, gamers, and fans in almost equal measure. So you'll see here, when we ask the identity question, they could choose all that apply, and 57% identify as readers, 53% as gamers. That's higher for Gen Z and Millennials, for Gen Zs as well, and then 52% as fans. And this identity and community aspect is developing and happening in those mobile spaces, but community is still a really important thing. 25% of those who say that they are fans because of the community aspect, and fan fiction is a big part of that. So they love a story world that they enter, and then they want to keep writing and reading within that space. 38% are reading and downloading fan fiction, and 24% buy merchandise from fan fiction worlds. So again, the buying from the worlds and the spaces that they love. And then 25% are writers, 10% podcasters, and 13% live streamers.
And this is a shout out to Francisco Cabre Vasquez, who is a student of ours at Portland State. He was the one who tipped me off to this particular writer, who got her start as a fan in a fan community, then produced a book that served those fans, and you can see she hit 90,000 sales for Iron Widow. And check out this copy. This is her description. This is where I'm supposed to say I'm a #1 New York Times bestselling sci-fi and fantasy author and a YouTuber with hundreds of thousands of subscribers. But we both know I'm still that cringy, meme-loving weeb on the inside. I'm in a cow suit because I made a promise to my friends 7 years ago that if I actually get published, this is what I'll take my author photo in, and so forth. So really, really, like fan community, fan identity, like read, write. I mean, people in this room have been talking about read, write since what, 95? I mean, like we've been talking about read, write forever, right? That's what blogs were. Remember blogs? And But I mean, now, like, this is big money. It's big money because she can mobilize a group of people who are authentically engaging with a story world they love. She's giving them more content that they love, and it's a mutually reinforcing cycle. This is, I wouldn't say it's unique to Gen Z, but I would say it's an attribute of Gen Z that everyone should be paying attention to.
So because they live online and in these commercial environments, really the power of online talent and influencers can't be understated. 32% of Gen Z and Millennials discover books through recommendations from talent. So authors, of course, included in that, but also live streamers, artists, podcasters, etc. 28% discover books through recommendations from influencers on various platforms. And then they're also buying because of recommendations and ads on particularly Instagram and TikTok. 32% on Instagram and 31% on TikTok.
Those are big conversion rates, of course. So this is our moment where we want to hear from you. And we have 3 minutes and 15 seconds to do it. What do you think about how Gen Z and millennial media habits influence your piece of the business or your passions? How does this affect you? Yeah, go ahead, Cassandra. Yeah, well, that already happened.
I'm obviously working with a publishing house, but I also have a 15-year-old and a 13-year-old. And one of the fun things about that has been when we have a young adult book, when I do the layouts and everything, I test run it on them. and also just watching my 15-year-old daughter, she doesn't read front to back. Mm-hmm. She reads the books, and she's not unusual in this. She reads backwards, forwards, inside out. She's like interested in fanfic and like writing it herself and everything. She tries it, but she's scared to show it to anyone. And so she's already demonstrating some of these behaviors. And my son is sort of claiming to be a non-reader.
Sure.
But he does reads graphic novels.
Yes.
Which you're not really touching on graphic novels specifically, but like the webtoon, for example.
We did ask a question that if you could have a story in text only or in graphical form, 59% of them said graphical form first, please.
Yeah, and the way the books that look almost like they could be a graphic novel but are actually novels are definitely attract your attention. And the other thing I was going to comment on was readability. I gave them bigger font, lots of white space. That's what they wanted, to make it easier to read.
Yeah.
I don't think necessarily everyone's caught up to the fact that children are being exposed to more types of media, and that actually getting them to sit down and get into an immersive environment and stay with something difficult and follow it through is harder for them. You just don't get as many opportunities to do it. So those are some of the interesting things of being a teens parent plus production person.
Yeah. Well, honestly, think mobile first, right? You want a lot of white space. You want a lot of kerning. Like you want to make the text look as much like a book as a book look as much like a screen as possible.
Hi. Like Cassandra, I have teens as well. I have one who's 12 at the beginning of the teens, and I have one who's 18, so I kind of watched the whole thing. And I'm curious, where do you see kind of this, the kids who are like 15, 16, 17 and up now, where do you see this trend going in like the next 10 years? Because I'm thinking, some of the younger teens are still reading quote unquote YA, which is a whole other discussion. But my 18-year-old displays these behaviors, but is also reading books, that are much more grown up and has been for years. And so in terms of sort of publishers or even authors marketing their books that are not necessarily geared towards that generation now, like for those ages now, but have come of age in this environment and maybe looking for other types of books, what do you kind of recommend, or what do you see as potential trends for this generation over the next 10 years?
Sure. And Rachel, I want to make space up there. Either I'll come down with you or you'll come up. So like we're gonna do it together. Well, I mean, one idea would be it's going to be very hard to find people. I mean, discoverability challenges are only going to be increased because of the magnitude of content that's out there, both paid and free. And so that is why you're seeing so much conversion from influencers. One of the things that I've learned by talking to my graduate students is that influencers become trusted because you develop a relationship over time, much in the way of the gal in the cow suit, right? Like, I mean, she said that 7 years ago she would pose in that outfit. And she's been building that relationship for 7 years, right? So I would say ongoing relationships with influencers is probably the safest bet because they're going to move between digital and print contexts fluidly and very, very quickly.
And following up about that fluidity, also of form. So one thing that's interesting, both in talking to our graduate students and that we found from the survey is, print is not dead. They really love print and the object, but also that they're buying things in multiple formats, that they're, going in and out sometimes for the same book, between ebook and audiobook and print. And so the flexibility of that and understanding that kind of fluid way that they move through things is also important.
The question I'm interested in, your data says 25% are writers. I'm interested in what you're talking about. This community is fascinating. What about the ones who aren't writers? What about the shy ones who don't participate in all of
In
this?
fan fiction, you mean?
Well, just within your survey, you've caught the really engaged readers who want to be part of the community at the writer level. And then there's this whole sort of more traditional group of readers. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I mean, the thing that comes to my mind initially is that we've thought about things that are interesting from this data that we want to continue to follow up on. And one of those is people who don't identify as readers. That's maybe not exactly getting at what you're talking about, which is different segments of readers themselves. But I think that information about that they're going to the library is interesting, and just knowing more about them would, those who don't identify as readers would be helpful for publishers and libraries.
And then of the people who don't identify as readers, when they do discover a book, let's say they're buying books for others or whatever, they're going to bookstores a lot. And bookstores are very attractive to non-readers. Why? There are a lot of things to do there. Right? You can get food, you can get tchotchkes, you can get all kinds of things.
Non-book items, yeah.
All kinds of non-book items. So, I mean, like thinking a little bit about other points of contact than just the usual places that people find books.
Thank you.